Around already. So, welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us today at the online conference Entangled Transparency 3.0. My name is Livia Nolasco-Rojas, and together with my colleague at the Center for Art and Media Karlsruhe, ZKM, Clara Runge, we will be the hosts of today's event. So throughout this brief conference, we will hear statements and we'll have the chance to discuss the role of transparency on the internet, specifically in a new yet only potential type of decentralized internet. Just to go back very, very briefly to the beginning, Web 1 in the early 90s was a content delivery network that allowed users to access static data on websites without having the chance to feedback them. It evolved to Web 2 in the mid-2000s that is currently still in use. It allows its users to create and distribute content on, for example, social media channels, as we very well know it, or streaming platforms. And now, 2 decades after the appearance of Web 2, the third version of the internet approaches seemingly quite rapidly. In order to grasp this shift and to have a chance to critically engage with it already before it actually arrives, this conference was conceived in close collaboration of 3 institutions. The Hyundai Art Lab, represented by Tai-Jung Kim and Do-Eun Cho, who are also somewhere here. The Goethe-Institut Korea, represented by Melanie Bono and Si-Soo Kim and Wo-Jung Choi. They are also somewhere on the site. And the Center of Art and Media, Karlsruhe. So together we posed questions such as what kind of organization processes are necessary in order to maintain online self-determination and sovereignty. What is the role of transparency, and in what extent shall it be part of the third web's structure? And maybe most importantly, what does blockchain technology mean for artistic production, outreach, and their infrastructures? We invited speakers and also invite now the participants, all of you on the site, to seek answers for these questions while listening to statements and then throughout the discussion round, which will be introduced and moderated by Michael Connor. So let me introduce the program in detail first. So we will start with a short presentation of the platform where this conference takes place, Common Garden. And after that, we will have the chance to listen to 2 live keynote presentations, each followed by a short Q&A. And the presentation of an artwork that resonates with various conceptual threads of Web 3.0 was planned to take place as part of the conference under the title The Endless Poem. It was conceived by Peter Weibel together with Christian Lölkes. But unfortunately, we have to announce with great sadness that the artistic scientific chairman of the ZKM, Peter Weibel, passed away in Karlsruhe on the 1st of March at the age of 78 after a short and serious illness. But before his illness, a video with him and Christian Lölkes was recorded in which they explained the poem's concept. So we will see this video, and following the video, artists, theoreticians, curators, and cultural practitioners will deliver either live or pre-recorded manifesto performances. We call them manifesto performances because they are short statements on the potentials of Web3 with a focus on artistic production and institutional practices. And as mentioned, we will close with a final discussion that is moderated by Michael Connor. But before we start with the program, I would like to give the word to my colleague Clara Runge, who will inform us about technical and practical details of the platform. So thank you very much, and I see you around.
Thank you, Livia. And yes, hello, also very warm welcome from my side. Before we start, I quickly want to share some technical information and general guidelines with you. The event will feature live sessions and show pre-recorded videos, as Livia already mentioned. The live sessions will take place nearby the screen share window, so in the area that we are gathered at the moment. For the presentation of the Endless Poem or the manifesto performances, we will move to the specific area on the page or on the garden. Of course, we will indicate that in the given moment. As you may have already noticed, during the conference, only the presenters are visible and audible while streaming. The visitors, so you are not visible or audible. Only if you get closer to another visitor's egg, your camera gets activated and you can talk with each other privately. You can move around freely on the page, but please notice that the volume of the speaker's voice will decrease the farther you move away from the presenter. If you have any questions during the event, you can write them in the chat next to the screen share window. We will collect them for the Q&A sessions. During this, we will also open a guest mic where you can ask your questions and share your comments directly. You just need to move your egg in the given guest mic circle and your camera will be activated. I'd also like to point out that the event will be recorded the entire time. After the conference, the recording will be shared or available on the garden itself and on the partners' websites. On this occasion, I'd like also to welcome Andy Koch from the ZCam Video Studio, who joins us in the event as the so-called recording egg to make sure everything is well documented. We are very happy about the opportunity to host this online conference here at the Common Garden platform. It's a really great alternative compared to the other giant communication tool corporations. The Artist Run platform has many wonderful features, some of which were custom made particularly for this event. The platform is built with a lot of love, but still in development at points. So in case technical issues appear during the event, please be patient. If there are major issues or you got kicked out, just refresh the page. To get some more information about the ideas and the background of this platform, I'm very happy that we have Constant Dulard with us today, the concept and media artist whose work is deeply connected to the internet as the founder of Common Garden. He will introduce the platform and share some insights about his early Web3 projects, starting from 2014 up to date. So, dear Constant, thank you for being here and taking the time. And yes, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Clara, and thank you everyone for joining here in this wonderful confetti fest, jumping around and making connections with everyone. I understand sometimes we need to find a quiet corner where you can just listen to things. I'll take a very brief moment to thank ZCam, of course, for working with Common Garden. Common Garden started a few years ago, well, as you can guess, with the start of lockdowns. But the main principle was to form an alternative to do something yourself. So seeing that a lot of institutions and a lot of presentation institutions were required or basically were dependent on working with large commercial platforms, let's say my artistic heart kicked in and I was thinking, I was raised by punks, at least educated by punks, we should do this stuff ourselves. So this is still in an experimental phase because we're tying together the project from project to project to project, let's say from different types of opportunities. So we're very happy to be here at this stage and where ZCam can host this wonderful conversation on Common Garden, excuse me. My own practice got involved with Web3 in 2014, as said, where we started to register artworks in the Bitcoin blockchain. It was like actually working with Ascribe.io here in Berlin, or actually I'm in Amsterdam, and we started to work with registering hashes inside a transaction. So you would send a minimal transaction to another party, and inside the transaction, or as a note to the transaction, you would send a hash to a file. That would be the unique identifier to that file, and therefore register and track it, be able to track its provenance. And this is something that I still find very interesting, that you would use that type of distributed technology to basically piggyback through that to find other infrastructures for communication, for identity management, and these things. So this is also something that we're at the moment we're working on in implementing within Common Garden. So account structures could work with Web3, and this is something that we're actively experimenting with, for example, Haus Elektronische Kunst and a lot of other partners, where we're trying to see if Web3 can actually be more than just a transaction or a transaction layer. And especially the identity management is something that I'm particularly interested in. I will keep it quite brief because I think it's a long program today, and we started a bit late. So again, thank you for attending Common Garden. I call it an artisanal medium. So it's made with a lot of love, and it will have its glitches here and there, and we're growing each time, and we're very happy to be in this position currently. Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I actually haven't experienced any glitch yet today, so that's already a really good sign. So then let's delve into the program, and let me introduce now our first keynote speaker, Bogna Konio, who will take us to a dark forest, but also to a computer-generated world where avatars of artworks and visitors float together, and where wormholes reveal hidden narratives. Among others, on the structure of the internet, if I'm right, Bogna, about this. And just very briefly to introduce Bogna, she's an assistant professor of media theory at the Interactive Media Arts Department at the New York University, Shanghai, where she also co-directs the AI and Culture Research Center. And she's also the co-editor of the forthcoming volume, Machine Decision is Not Final, China and the History of Future of Artificial Intelligence. So thank you very much, Bogna, that you are here with us today. And please start streaming that we can hear you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Bogna?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, let me just get my presentation full screen. Is it acceptable now? Can you guys give me some feedback?
No.
Well, I see your presentation. I also hear you fine.
Can you see it?
Yes. Yes.
I can start. Okay. So thank you everyone for having me. Going to address the question of Web3 and Web2 and transparency through the question of darkness. So please join me. I'm gonna jump straight into it. Imagine it is the 1990s and the sky is the color of a television tuned to a dead channel. Nerds, freaks, geeks, and punks get hooked on a new technology, once hidden in the basements of universities, but now going mainstream. They called it the cyberspace, a term coined by writer William Gibson, or more aptly, they called it the web. The web heralded an end and a beginning. The Cold War was over. The Soviet Union failed in bringing to life its own competing vision of the internet. a Promethean, romantic, and utopian top-down system of efficient economic distribution that was supposed to prove that communism was better than capitalism, but they lost. What won was a schizophrenic system of ebbs, flows, and disjunctions, a technology that twists and turns the whole world into strange connections. And in fact, the network emerges as a defining word of this era. The early internet culture is libertarian, anarchic. The cyberspace is imagined as wild and free, where we, under the camouflage of avatars, would be able to escape the social determinism of identity and prejudice and create a real counterculture. Now, fast forward a mere decade. After every investor in America poured money into so-called dot-com companies, in the early 2000s, the bubble burst. No one could figure out how to make money on the internet, and the technology was proclaimed a fluke, briefly, like just another hype going nowhere. And yet, a few companies like Google, Amazon, and Wikipedia figured it out. The key to their success: make the websites interactive and customizable, track and trace what users do with them, encourage them to post things about themselves, sell predictions based on this data to advertisers, see your money stack up. Within a few years, the paradigmatic website of the so-called Web 2 is something called the Facebook. Facebook, where cyberpunks of the 20th century dreamt of no faces, of anonymous and subversive roleplay, in the 21st century, the users of Web 2 plaster their faces all over the internet, trying to define their profiles in as much detail as possible. Here I am, this is exactly who I am and what I like. Scholar Elisha Lim describes how what we talk today about as identity politics is better called identity economics, where your capital is defined by the way an advertiser might see you. That is, an advertising profile Facebook might keep on you, which reduces you to your likes, preferences, and demographics. But it becomes also our way of self-identification, and it's what we literally sell to Facebook, so it can optimize our feeds better and make more money. Now, fast forward another decade. First through the grapevine and rumors whispered in private group chats, then as full-on hype hysteria in the press, the term Web3 is everywhere. In the words of Stephen Deal, the Web3 bubble was one of the most bizarre events I've ever witnessed. In the span of a week, people and tech press started to hallucinate about a technology which patently did not exist and which no one could describe. The only comparable thing would be the dancing manias of the 17th century, mysterious and to this day unexplained events that involved thousands of people dancing erratically until collapsing from exhaustion. But it was a dream of another way, or of Web 1 done correctly this time, a decentralized network of anonymity where demographics or identities would not play a central role anymore. No more identity economics, up with decentralized and opaque networks. Last year, I tweeted, frustrated with the language of Web 2, I don't want free speech. I want a web that doesn't correlate to need space and doesn't turn everything into a popularity contest, narcissism saddled with dopamine addiction. Anonymize it, make our eyeballs and nervous systems sovereign, no more identity economics. But could it really be so? To answer it, perhaps we need to think about how Web 2 actually works. A few years back, I messaged my friend on Signal about witnessing another so-called shitstorm online on Twitter. I wrote, everyone is in total hysteria mode again. Why is it that the most level-headed people you know lose their minds in flame wars online? We are in a chain of endless suspicion and conflict. Why is it so? I am working on a text called The Dark Forest Theory of the Internet to explain it. It will be about the logic of Web 2, but rather than focusing on the content and who is an asshole and who said what, I want to write an hyper-deterministic thought experiment where humans have virtually no free will in online interactions. Marshall McLuhan already told us that the medium is the message, but Web 2 has us freaking out about messages all the time. Even those who know about the attention economy and how the algorithm rigs your brain towards outrage or seeking engagement from others, they fall for it. But it is not our fault that we do, because I think there is a dynamic tied to communication in general, not only online communication, that is as inescapable as gravity. If you trip over a bench and fall, that is not gravity acting maliciously, but when someone is attacking me online, I imagine they are acting maliciously, even though maybe it is the same process as gravity. And additionally, by describing such a limit, I will move away from a popular idea in progressive theories, which is that human interactions are completely dependent on social structures or platforms that they play out on, and therefore changing the structure is enough to changing the dynamic. What if it isn't? That's why all that we ever write about is resistance as the only dynamic, but I want to chart the limits of our agency to understand our situation better. And I finish, perhaps it is because I grew up reading Polish intellectuals revising their notion of our agency, capability, and freedom under the Soviet occupation, after they all witnessed how and why revolutions fail. But perhaps the West is still on an uphill path towards a revolution, not on a bad trip that follows it, where the question people were preoccupied with is how to continue living as humans, knowing that some form of conflict is always inescapable. So that text happened and was eventually developed for an exhibition called The Black Market by artist Andrzej Szkółka, where the focus was on large inhuman systems operating autonomously from human agency and control. And what I wanted to explore in it is how behind the ceaseless exchange of arguments, selfies, and viral videos of political events on Web 2 is a giant automated machine, an extraction process that reduces all of us to the information that we generate. Think about the pods in the Matrix, where each human was enclosed and the machines harvested them for energy. We are also harvested for the continued existence of Web 2. The Dark Forest Theory of the Internet. In the 1990s, cyberculture theorist Mark Fisher wrote a theory of cyberspace as a prosthesis of humanity, a cybernetic nature, and an extension of our nervous system. He noticed that our situation right now is quite gothic. We are commingling with inorganic agents, and perhaps we are even possessed by a computer rhythm. We are the zombies, the undead, and the puppets at the end of the strings, with algorithmically curated content dictating the rhythm of our thoughts and the substance of our opinions. As Lev Manovich already noticed, our thoughts are downstream from what the machine selects for us on the screen. Our endorphin channels and social relations come second to our addiction to machine stimulants. In 1991, Donna Haraway already observes the shift of scale in human culture after computation. What before was just a person becomes now part of a system. Human relations turn into the language of socio-technical management. Organism becomes population, and human itself is replaced by communication. The internet alike is a system. It's a systemic illusion of interiority and of identity, but it only appears to be ours. As Fisher writes, this doesn't work by suppression. It compels your participation, but it doesn't represent you. It doesn't even manipulate you. It substitutes for you. Even so, the thoughts on the screens appear to be ours. Think about the original Facebook prompt. What's on your mind? Such a big philosophical question, such a provocation. It prompts us to think that we have an individual mind online, where the truth is that with each post we become a node in a giant machine-human hive mind. Our thoughts archived on the screen fortify the hallucination of a stable self, an individual, sustained by the interface through which we communicate. In such a prison of interiority, everything hinges on us, and yet no one feels any agency. No wonder that neuroses and anxiety underlie our culture. Everything is internalized. Even the weather and the fate of the planet feels down to us. And yet we can do only what the medium affords us: externalize, communicate, feeding and growing the so-called internet. By giving undue attention to the content of what we do online and what we say and who we are, we miss a bigger picture. Mark Fisher says, "It is not only that you deceive yourself, it is also that you are deceived about having a self online." Through this appeal to the personal, communication becomes impulsive and appears harmless, even if the internet might serve an impersonal, machinic function entirely. We may recall that William Burroughs once wrote that language itself might be a virus from the outer space, here to control our minds and breed itself further, only using us as a container. Maybe the internet is similar. It's such an alien invasion too, but by capital. In the end, for the online platforms, humans are not as important as the memes that we carry, the information that can be extracted and monetized for the continued growth of increasingly autonomous and intelligent networks. The computers let us see everything but act on very little. Our very agency is by definition a constant seeing, a constant gluing of eyeballs and nervous systems to the screen. The more the world can be described through such complexity and emergent machinic behavior, and the more we learn even from science that maybe free will and causality might be shaky and we are not in control of what happens to our brains online, the more we seem committed to reasserting dogmatically textual descriptions of our thoughts and morals online. If only we expressed ourselves clearly, we think, surely the politics and ethics of the world would fall into place. But we cannot just enter into an active network like that and hope for a straightforward exercise of politics. And so our impotence seems to be, no matter what I say or do, all I think about is extracted. Behind any cute content I share online is an automated extraction process that reduces every single one of us to the complexity and conflict that we can generate. This extraction process is not unique to the internet, but could be a cosmic law. The terms associated with Web 2, such as personal website, social media, profile, avatar, or the Internet of You, focus on interiority. It is all about you, and it is all about humans. But we can have a theory of communication that grasps how human exchanges are framed by laws that are not strictly social, and maybe that's what we need to understand first before rebuilding towards something like Web 3. Chinese science fiction writer Liu Cixin authored a trilogy titled Remembrance of the Earth's Past. This trilogy abounds in ideas about the nature of communication and how communication connects us to dynamics actually larger than us. So language is human, but the patterns of communication itself are inhuman. They are dictated by the laws of physics and even by the cosmos itself. It's interesting that among all human nations that still exist, it is China that prides itself on the longest history of astronomy and currently invests resources in extraterrestrial communication research. Even today, the phrase Tianming, the mandate of heaven, is used to describe whether Chinese rulers have legitimacy to rule. Though the books are not about the internet at all, they are more so about the heavens. Liu's work on cosmic sociology, informed by physics on the one hand and the Cold War on the other, allow me to develop a theory of information extraction grand in scale, and to outline automated dynamics tied to online communication, where human intent or any specific content being communicated do not really matter. The central concept of Lewis' novels is dark forest theory. He says anything that participates in information exchange, humans or any life form, has to answer to the laws of thermodynamics. Each system, such as the internet, progresses towards high entropy, that is, towards disorder. Conflict is one of the fastest ways to progress towards disorder, and so everything progresses towards conflict. Communication is a fantastic tool for producing conflict. In simple human terms, we would say, put 3 people in a room together and you have 10 conflicting ideas. That is exactly how communication produces high entropy. Because communication is loaded with potential conflict, acts of talking to each other are always reckless, like shining light in a dark forest and attracting predators. This is why in the novels, any intelligent species actually is cautious to not contact another. It's like a flipped Fermi paradox. Rather than asking, why is the universe silent? We ask, why the hell are you shouting? That is, the novels tell us the universe is not noisy and we don't hear from anyone else because they are intelligent enough to stay silent. They know communication is dangerous. And perhaps that's what humans could learn too. This theory flips the underlying assumption that intelligence is always about talking better, thinking about better phrases, and thinking about better ways. It actually says communication is a sign of stupidity. But on the other hand, communication is something we evolved for our survival. We cannot distinguish between being able to communicate and being able to survive. And so we are in a paradox with no exit. The desire to communicate is necessary, and yet it produces conflict. This is an automated process that we cannot get out of. Though in the novels, humanity makes such a discovery late, for cosmic civilizations, this is essentially an amoral proposition. It's an automated law of physics, and everyone obeys it. Some might call this very cold, even nihilistic, and yet what it does is trying to generalize the laws of physics to arrive at a cosmic game theory of communication, as suited to thinking about first contact with aliens as it is to thinking about contact on social media. In this way, just like war or conflict distributes entropy, Web 2 is just a method for distributing entropy. It incentivizes us to produce complex and compulsive communication and dissipates entropy through conflict. The high concentration of noise online is not simply a result of bad choices or wrong ethics, but an inescapable outcome tied to a high entropy scenario. And so, to build towards Web 3, we might say that in Web 2, on a personal, intimate scale, the internet is a technology for instant communication, but on a large scale is something like a technology for cosmic war and for entropy extraction, colliding us against one another. So I want to go to the next slide, but how do I do it? Just a moment. I'm almost done. So some informed thoughts about Web 3 in light of this. Going beyond individuality, beyond communication, beyond disorder, beyond conflict, what is actually possible? If Web 1 is anonymity and no data money, and Web 2 is pseudonymity or real-life identity with data money, and Web 3 is heralded as anonymity plus still data money, that makes us think, so can encryption and anonymity and secrecy actually offset entropy and offset conflict that we seem to be caught in? If what we do not like about digital capitalism is the monetization of prediction and perpetuation of identity economics through consumer profiles. Something to consider about Web3 is whether it extracts data in a way that's unchained from personalization. So the dark forest mechanism would still run because it is tied to communication, and that conflict is inescapable. But if it's not tied to profiles and identities, it doesn't run on us. It might run on our impersonal alter egos. I say in this tweet from August, everyone should be known under 1,000 names and have bots based on themselves run rogue online to make all browsing data junk and disable advertising algorithms. It might be an effective form of camouflage against algorithms that want to package and sell every thought, opinion, and political stance you have, and profile you to either cease having opinions and stay silent altogether, silence being the measure of intelligence, or to automate the opinion having. Value then becomes speculative, with bots talking to bots, talking to bots, talking to advertising bots, selling and purchasing things in an automated manner, like high-frequency trading, but for the internet. And perhaps underneath all that, we find an escape route and an exit. Perhaps we camouflage under the bots, and perhaps what they produce we can distribute differently, given that it would not be tied to any one identity or any one person. And perhaps this is just a dancing mania and a countercultural fever dream, but it is a dream nonetheless. And I will stop here. I have no idea if you guys heard this presentation and if this worked. I will start to
Okay, so I'm back, and hopefully everybody can hear me now. So the question, and if you would start streaming, Bogna, that would be great. Because I would love to pose the question about the difference between Web 2 and Web 3. So Bogna, you talked about Web 2 as a human-centered network, and you talked about an impersonalization process in terms of Web 3. And I would like to ask you to elaborate on this eventual non-human or post-human character of Web3 very briefly.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
That's amazing. Okay, so happy to be an egg with you all. I only heard like the last part of Livia's question where you said, can I elaborate on the impersonal nature, perhaps, of the coming web? I guess we call it Web3 as a placeholder, right? And hoping just for a different dynamic that would address the things that tend to bother us. And a lot of those things seem to be related to certain packaging of human identity and thoughts and interactions for the relations of capital and for what is called platform capitalism. So I've been trying to think about, and I'm quite, I guess, a fatalistic person. So first I try to think about the limits, and I'm trying to think, what are the borders of what we are up against? And it's how I started developing this idea of the dark forest, because I was intrigued by why is there so much conflict kind of online? Is this something that is embedded in the platform? Is it embedded in human nature, so-called? Or is it embedded, as Liu Cixin would suggest, in the nature of communication, right? So it's just a thought experiment that he says it's the nature of communication itself that is actually the problem, because it always tends towards disorder. So that makes me think about Web3 and the future web in kind of a different way, that the key is, rather than trying to imagine a purely kind of utopian environment where humans interact perfectly well with each other, kind of to accept that there will be entropy and conflict always tied to just diversity of messages and communication. However, thinking about maybe directing that surplus of entropy away from actual humans towards something like inhuman agents, such as bots or certain automated dynamic. And I think Hito Steyer also has this idea at some point where she says, like, what if we make like a spam army to like optimize certain things for advertising, and we actually therefore gain an escape route or some time away from those dynamics that seem so predatory. So that's kind of where I've been thinking. It's maybe not directly related to blockchain, but it does relate to ideas of like transparency and opacity and automation, and thinking about an internet that's not so based on identity. However, whether that's a model that can scale up, it's something that I very much doubt at this point, and it remains for me something like a countercultural dream or exercise, and I would be interested to know if it could scale up, but my, I don't know, fatalistic nature prevents me a bit, but I've been thinking about it conceptually so far. Hope that answers.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, the dark forest is a beautiful metaphor, indeed, that enlightens this not yet completely easy to grasp phenomenon that is being called the Web3, and I do agree that it is rather a placeholder yet. I see that there is another question in the chat, but unfortunately we are a little bit late, so I would suggest to keep this question for the discussion, and to move on to the second keynote by Maurice Benayon, whom we also invited to the conference to give us probably very different perspective on the question of transparency and Web3. Maurice is a French pioneer of new media art, also a curator and theorist based in Paris and Hong Kong. His work employs various media, including computer graphics, immersive virtual reality, or large-scale urban media art installations. He's often conceptual, and his work constitutes a critical investigation of the mutations in contemporary society induced by the emerging or recently adopted technologies. So, Maurice, welcome, and thank you very much for accepting our invitation. and I would like to ask you to start streaming and start sharing your screen. So the garden is yours.
Now I can hear you. I don't know if you're talking to me because it was silent. Suddenly it was totally silent, and so I couldn't hear the last discussion.
Oh, well, I practically introduced you and mentioned that that the garden is yours. So
I'm glad to hear that. Start sharing your screen. Wait a minute. I have to do that again. Oh, there are two start sharing the screen buttons. So I'm not sure exactly why, but okay, I see. I will become a big pro of that soon, next time. Okay, do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. First, thank you so much for inviting me to this discussion symposium. I know the situation is a kind of very sad one because of Peter Weibel, and I know many friends will be there. Unfortunately, I cannot come for the ceremony. I would like also to congratulate Bogna Konyor, because I think her talk was great, really great talk, and I'm really happy she did that. I will have a different approach, of course, because I position myself here in this talk as from an artist point of view. I try to figure out what is the impact of recent technologies on the mutation that artists are scared of, or afraid of, and how they could deal with that. The fact that I base the talk on some recent works is because it's all about entanglement. It's about how these different factors, from the network to AI, from the blockchain to robotics and so on, have an impact on how we can position ourselves as an artist. So this is what I was just saying. Of course, we have to start with some basic, so everybody has in mind what has been attributed to Leonardo, and that la pittura è cosa mentale. And so this is something happening that I will precise later, because most of the things I will mention are related to the idea that now artists work not only with their brain, not only from their brain, but they produce something directly out of the brain. So how do we deal with complexity? I will start with something I presented in the show in Asia Society, Hong Kong, where I presented a timeline of my work. And this timeline presents different works I did during the last 40 years and how they are articulated together. Of course, we would expect this to be based on specific technologies and to say this is VR, this is 3D computer graphics, this is AR, this is urban media, and so on. But actually, this is not what I did. I tried to explain that behind the work that I was trying to do were actually concepts. I started by thinking about something that should be said about the evolution of technologies, but not from a technical point of view, but from actually a conceptual point of view. So this is what you see, or what you cannot read in gray. This is a different concept and their articulation to the different kind of work I have done. So as you cannot read, maybe I can zoom in. So you see the artwork as a society of agents, reactive architecture of communication, organic exhibition design, collective retinal memory, critical fusion, and also extended relativity, open media, iterative curatorship, Yugen AI, neurodesign, augmented serendipity, reification, artificial intentionality, sublimation, and so on, and behavioral design. So that I thought we need to say that media artists are not necessarily making demos about technologies, but they are strongly affected by the mutation of technologies. Of course, yeah, I will go through that quite quickly. But infrarealism is, for example, the fact that the realism of physical models may be used to produce image without capturing the light reflected by the world. So that's a kind of post-photography. Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't want that. That's ridiculous. A very important concept. Let me skip the slides because anyway, I will talk about them later, maybe this way. I will talk about the art object and the art subject, how we went from the object to the subject, and what does it mean that the artwork is a subject, and what can be the impact, and how AI, for example, may have an impact on that. How the artists come to design the behavior of the artwork, and how the artwork does practice behavior analysis, and how the artist is actually producing, including in the artwork, what we could call artificial intentionality. So, and then I will talk about the artwork as a society of agents and so on. So I try to, because otherwise I have too many slides, I'm sorry. So the semantic mechanics of the blockchain, so that's something important that is in the smart contract. In a way, the smart contract is a regulation tool that is not so different from, let's say, a prompt for regulation for a model of behavioral transaction. The meiotic engine, I will maybe say something about that. I'm not sure. The inclination, which is also related to the recommendation engine, and the brain ecosystem. So I will explain why, what I call neurodesign, why we say that we are doing iterative curatorship when we use AI. And augmented serendipity is one of the potential what came out of that, and sublimation and reification, the two concepts that I will use conversely, and also I will confront them. And critical fusion is what is the position of the artist in society. So that's what I want to talk about. I'm not doing that. So we go, I start with the concept of virtuality, because this is something that was not at all planned. I'm not talking about virtual reality. I'm talking about virtuality as a component of reality. And so this very basic thing from Milgram, reality, virtuality continuum, is kind of simplistic and doesn't explain at all what is at stake for the artist. So we could say that in a way the artist may be confronted. And when I say the artist, I may say also everybody producing something which is a kind of a autonomous object or function that have an impact on society. And so virtuality is, of course, the virtual is the opposite of the actual. So that means once it happen, we talk about the future. Temporality is about the future. So how to make a work that is not based on what has been done by the artist, but on what will happen thanks to the artist. Complexity, different levels. Some people just use randomization, but of course it can be experiential and relational complexity. Interactivity. The work ignores the public, recognize the public, acknowledge the presence, or dialogue with the public. And so you have different functions you can guess. And I go straight, sorry. No, because I discovered I have too many slides, so definitely I have to do that. So the concept of art subject is a very important one because it's one of the fantasies of the humankind, creating the living in a way, in a demiurgic fantasy. And this means, for example, in the situation of interaction with the world, we have goals and we interact that's inspired by the Norman graph, how we interact with the world, how we interact with the machine. But now the machine is is mirroring the form of interaction. And so the complexity of behavior of the machine that is related to the evolution we have been mentioning is actually something that creates this weird thing that suddenly we are confronted to the artwork as if we were confronted to somebody. And so some of the function that, of course, in terms of ethology of the so-called art subject considered as a living being, and this is something that you may see if I send you the slides. So the starting point of the Brain Factory project that I started in 95, 96, and I see that in the public there are some people like Dun Choi that has been involved in presenting this many times. So the Brain Factory is based on a very simple concept that one of the two fantasies of the humankind is sublimation and reification. So sublimation, that the conversion of the world into data. So that means into into little elements that could be computed or treated by a human brain. And so the materiality of the thing is not as important. What is important is how we understand and we can interact with the world. And reification is a Marx concept that all our values, attractions, and so on could become objects, because then they would be marketable. So the 3D printing, for example, is converting a 3D model that has been generated as a sublimated model, and it becomes an object that can be sold. So this project was based on the idea that create a situation where we go from the brain to the object, and this is, of course, a kind of parodic interpretation of this process that we want to do. That means to control the world. So this evolved more recently in 2019 with the Value of Values project, where I dealt with finance versus ethics, and where it became interesting to compare value in financial terms with values as human values and ethical terms. So I have two collaborators on this project, Tobias Klein and Nicolas Mendoza, two artists that have been working on that. I show you a bit of video. If I can play, yes, I can. Do you see the video? Do you see the video? Hello?
Fine. Yes, it's fine. It's working.
Can you see the video? Oh, can you see the video?
Yes, we do. We do.
Hello?
The video just stopped.
Ah, the video was stopped. Maybe if I don't, if I just play it that way, you may see it. Do you see it?
We do.
Do you see the video now?
Yes, we do see the video.
You don't see the video?
Yes, we do.
See...
Yes, we do.
Okay. So that we use EEG to take from the brain a very simple information, and the user is facing a shape generator, and the shape generator is trying to give a shape to human values. And so as human values exist in the human brain, what happens, the human brain is the ecosystem. And the human values are living beings that evolve thanks to a feedback loop according to how the brain workers, so the public, interact with it, react. So it's like nature assessing the living beings. And when nature thinks this being cannot survive, dies. So what we take from the brain is only yes and no. So this was in Guangzhou Brainian. And then the 3D model that are created that way from a chain of DNA, conceptual DNA, are sent to the blockchain, and people can start making transactions with them. So they can transfer and they can barter. So I say, I don't want happiness, I want sex, for example, or I don't want money, I want democracy, or I don't want art, and so on. And so this generates, let me skip this because I will show you other things. Transactional poetry. Transactional poetry is a literal interpretation of the transaction. There is a transaction, you give me money to have love, that means this will be a sentence saying that. And so this is factual, and this is what people really do. And there are NFTs. So it was launched in June 2019. And what is interesting is that we go back to this idea of communicating, or let's say, transmitting messages through transactions. When we consider that writing, speaking, and so on, writing mostly, and calculating came from transactions in the history of the humankind. And so we can say it's a global project with plenty of components, and it's actually a network of artworks. This is what I will present. This is the entanglement I was talking about, because you will see that there are different actors that are agents, actually, and these agents have different biases and different tools, and they play a role in creating a kind of micro-society where we go deeper in this topic. So here the public become artist, curator, collector, art dealer, and trader. And the artwork itself as a generator, calligrapher, a printer, a reader, an interpreter, scientist, analyst, accountant, and so on. So the artwork from one show to another, they evolve. And so this was the launching at Art Center Nabi, where we had the media coming, and this was the launching of the VOV tokens. So in June 2019, that was in Guangzhou, where we had the app that allows people to do transaction, but we are talking about actual transaction. And this is this was in Italy, in Macerata, for the for a show where we had a very small space, but with mirrors around it. And this was in Mocha Taipei. That was a kind of big version. And this is the most recent one that will be presented in a different way next week. It starts in Hong Kong next week, but it was in October, November in Asia Society Hong Kong, called Morphogenesis of Values, how you give shape to values, how you give shape to ideas, how you give shape to thoughts. And so people are sitting in these kind of chairs and they interact with the thing. So that, one important aspect that we may discuss is the idea of biases and prompt. So I would like to clarify some things about the idea that a prompt is not an order we give to AI software. It's a question that we address to the kind of large memory or global memory of the humankind. And this question, we get answers. These answers represent a kind of statistical perception of what people would understand out of that. And so that's the interesting thing. So the shape you get at the end of the process with value of values, you get a 3D model that you can do whatever you want with it, including create a new 3D calligraphy. So each values are represented. I decided to use these models to create a calligraphy. And then an AI on the left is actually reading this calligraphy, trying to convert it into Chinese ideograms. And on the right, this is the visual part. So where it becomes interesting is here. So on the left, we find keywords coming from rotating the character. And this rotation generate or suggest words that are used then by two different interpreters. The interpreters are actually AIs. One is a visual AI, as you can see. This is purely Midjourney, with a specific bias that is supposed to be an artistic bias. So the prompt is designed to create an artistic bias. But there are subtitles, and the subtitles are, have another kind. The interpreter, the writer, has actually another kind of bias, which is a marketing bias. So we have marketing discourse over aesthetic discourse. Yeah, I could show you that, but I'm not sure. How much time do I have left? Maybe nothing.
Yes, please come to an end in the next 2 minutes, if possible.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's say that what is important here is, as soon as you have tokens representing values, human values, and you can trade them exactly like a trading platform, you actually reveal what cultural groups or geographic communities rank the human values. And the ranking of human values can be compared on the website. So if you go to vov.art, you will see all the information about the evolution of the value and the values, and compare different places like that. So that's the new trading platform. You can also make a 3D printed objects. So this is done by Tobias Klein. This is a footprint of freedom. Like the dinosaurs, as soon as you are interested in the footprint, that means you don't have the dinosaurs anymore. So you may not have freedom anymore. And just to conclude, some other example of this kind of reflection, combining different tools. This is robotic arms playing human conflicts. So they play according to different models of conflict, like gender equality and Black Lives Matter and class struggle. And so robots try to understand humans. So just wondering why they do that. And this is to end with the project I did with Refik Anadol, where we did urban installation, where the interaction of the art subject is an interaction. So they are aliens, actually. They are immigrants, and they interact with the people they don't know, don't understand, don't speak the language, and they try to learn it. And so the forms of interaction first are visual impacts and things like that. And then more and more the sound, the gesture, the two entities, there are two entities, try to figure out how either understand humans or understand each other. So it's two artworks that try to understand each other as well. I think that's it.
Thank you so much for this very rich presentation. And it was great to see so different artworks of yours, and to have a peek into your very prolific artistic work, and also to learn about their conceptual background. Currently, I don't see any question in the chat. But if there's a question to Maurice, we can discuss it later on throughout the discussion. Again, we are a little bit behind the schedule, so I would suggest that that we skip the question and answer session and move on. But throughout the discussion, in the end, we will have the chance to pose further questions to Maurice. So the next point is the presentation of the planned artwork Endless Poem, which sadly couldn't be realized. So as an exemplary prototype, the Endless Poem, inspired by Peter Weibel, would have accompanied the conference Entangled Transparency 3.0. The renowned media artist, former CEO of the ZKM, would have started the online collaborative text. That was the plan. Then the thread was planned to be taken up by any self-assigned contributor, almost in the spirit of the Exquisite Corpse game. And only in this case, the previously written entries would have remained visible. So we will see a video that was recorded, and we will see that Peter Weibel is talking about this concept, and in this he sees information technology as a tool that makes the realization of concepts possible that earlier only existed as an idea. The concept of the endless poem was already articulated in the 19th century, as he mentions it, but only became possible in the 21st century due to the development of information technology. So let us listen to the explanation of a conceived but unfinished work of art that, unlike in the 19th century, could have been realized in our present day. So I would like to ask all the participants to move towards the video, which is on the right upper end of the site. So you can also just follow me. And here we see the video box.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Peter Weibel. I'm the head artistic scientific director of ZKM. This is my partner, Christian Oelkers.
Yes, I welcome from my side as well.
And it is a pleasure for us to participate in this conference, which will open a new chapter in the digital art world, in the new use of the technology of digital tools. And our contribution to this new chapter in digital art is the conception of an endless poem. We could also say our contribution is the question, what are the options for poetry, for literature, in the age of Web 3.0? And Christian Oelkers will explain to you first the structure of this new Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, which are the basic for our ideas.
So in Web 3.0 or in Web 3 in general, the user becomes more important in the decision on how content is formed. Not only he becomes a contributor, but also he decides more. So the structures become more flat and there is less of a central element. We want to take a look at how this different structure of how content and how of ideas are managed and how decisions are taken reflect in the way texts, poesy and content in general can be generated. So for this, we took the idea of the Web3 as a distributed system, distributed physically in space, distributed in the way of creation and contributors, and have lines of texts combined together into an endless poem. Endless poem because it is not anymore attached to one creator, to one source, but to a network that inputs at different times, at different locations into as what can be seen as a chat room. So we take the element of chat where content is formed line by line and see how this can be translated to a poem, which is also based on lines.
In a strange but wonderful coincidence, now in 21st century, we have the technical tools to fulfill desires and demands from advanced poetry in 19th century. In 19th century, we had French poets Mallarmé, Stéphane Mallarmé, Arthur Rimbaud, and also Comte de Lautréamont, which is a pseudonym. And this wonderful poet, Comte de Lautréamont, he demanded, he wrote a sentence, poetry must be made by all. This was a demand from avant-garde poetry in 19th century. Poetry must be made by all. But we did not have the technical tools, even not in the 20th century, to fulfill this dream and this demand. Today, with Web3, as Christian has explained, it's like this. So normally there is one author who has influence on writes one poem. Please show the drawing.
Yes. So normally we have one core idea of an author who interacts with his surroundings and then writes a poem which is physically limited to a page. So it has a start, it has an end, it has a definite number of lines. And in the Web3, we like to think of the poem as being a network of individual authors that are all on the same level, and their common contribution becomes the poem itself. So there has to be a start, so someone has to input the first line, but from them, each node, how you could call it in a technical term, sets lines, a little bit like a group chat. But the idea is that this group chat keeps evolving. Authors can join and can leave out, and each day, each time contribute more and more lines, add more words, which then also can result in new lines. So the idea is to see what happens if you, instead of creating something from one person on one page with a definite amount of lines and time and space, if you create the same content in a more open and distributed way.
In the poetry before, there was one single author who to finish a poem. But now, with Web3, the existence of a collective who participates in the creation of the poem is a necessary condition. That means that normally, when the author has finished the poem, he can die. And with a poet, dies the poem. It does not change anymore. So it is finite. It is not endless. It has ended. The death of the author is the end of the poem. It cannot be changed. But now we have the opposite. When the author, the man or the person or the woman who writes the first line dies, we don't care, because the poem survives. Because we have a collective that many people for decades, maybe for centuries, will continue the first line. So this is a very important change, a radical revolution, that indeed poetry must be made by all. That means we need all. We need a collective. Without the collective, it does not work. This is a condition of Web3.
And the idea behind is also to understand from a technical point of view how these new technologies can interact with existing art forms. As said previously, that everybody has to contribute to poetry. Well, the nature of Web3 demands collaboration itself, so it becomes a technical requirement. While before you could write a poem on your own, if you want to create something in this distributed organization, then you have to be at least 2 people. So the collaboration is forced by the system. The same way also that the many ideas like blockchain in the Web 3.0 hold the word chain in it. So it is always a chain of elements. It's something that is chain. The elements relate to each other the same way they would do in a poem. So for us, it's also taking existing structures and methods that are used for many other types of interactions on the net, mostly for payment, for transfer of artworks, like being an NFT world, to understand these chained events and to use them for poetry.
Christian described very good the technical basis for another revolution, because normally poetry was something of the elite. Yeah? It was a model, more or less, unfortunately, of exclusion. Now it's just the opposite. Now we create with the digital tools the basis for a model of inclusion, a model of participation. So everybody, like Lautréamont has said, poetry must be made by all. Everybody has a chance. Everybody has a chance to participate to create a good poem. So it's a democratic model of inclusion which we need 21st century. What I dream of is that this endless poem turns society into a poetic society, not into a society of war, of exclusion, just the opposite, into a society of respect, into a society of friendship, of mutual respect and admiration, because everybody can participate in the creation of one of the highest achievements of mankind. One of the highest achievements of mankind is the creation of poetry, not only with words, but also with music and drawings, etc. So suddenly, what was demanded by Beuys and Lautréamont, everybody can be an artist. Now we can fulfill it with these technical tools. Normally, you write a poem on a page, on a flat surface. Now with this tool, the poem is written line by line. So it's a linear sequence, a linear chain of letters, of signs in a temporal dimension. So poetry was always a temporal-based art form, especially spoken poetry, because the spoken poetry, which was for hundreds of years the only way to create and to receive poetry, you utter vocals, sounds, and each sound annihilates the sound before. You only can understand me when you accept that the word I speak now kills the words I've spoken before. So it's a little bit like music. So poetry was always more or less a temporal-based exercise, but then came the book. Then it was an exercise on a two-dimensional flat surface. But now again, with this technology, even on the surface now, it's interesting, becomes a temporal-based linear sequence of letters. So again, it becomes music, and we have to learn to understand this chain of letters as a kind of notes, like in music, and we have to follow them in a kind of melodic way. One of the best periods in the last 2,000 years was the poetry of troubadours in the 12th century. They had one maximum as one order, mots and son. Mots is words, and son means music. The troubadour poetry, maybe even the beginning of all good European poetry, was created in this combination. We don't need the music, but only the visual appearance of line by line is already remembering us of this origin of authority in spoken language. So that means what we create now, by the endless poem, is an endless line, a chain, a sequence of letters.
So I would say that many could think that the idea of writing a poem line by line on a piece of paper, even if the paper would be infinitely long, is at the core not a new concept itself. But the technology that is now available allows to go beyond the limit of what was previously possible. To the amount of collaboration between poets, there are always very strong limits. There are limits of space, there are limits of available papers, but with this digital tool, suddenly these limits vanish and they disappear. It is possible to collaborate around the globe at the same time. It is not tied to any kind of physical experiences. And I think we are also very curious to see what does it mean for the content if suddenly these kinds of limits are vanished and disappeared. So it is I think also a good experiment just to try out what these kind of technology innovations, even if they just take something and evolve it even further, do and realize at the end.
Very important point. And the idea of an endless poem is a contradiction to the idea of the book, because you cannot make a book with endless pages. Even when you make an anthology of 2,000 years of poetry, it is not more than 1,000 or 2,000 pages. So to create an endless poem, that means we are surpassing the books. We go beyond the books. This is very important. With this new tool of Web3, we are able to go beyond the limits of the book, beyond the frontiers of the book. So we are creating poetry in an open space which is really endless. So it means it's not only endless in time. As long as humanity lives, it can continue everywhere, every time, to continue this poem. Normally, a poet is bound as a prisoner to the book. But now you can read the book everywhere you are, and you can participate with others to create new verbs, new lines of this poem. So we have different degrees of openness. Open space, because it's an endless book. It's an endless time. It can continue even when the author is dead. And it has an endless participation. There's no limit to the collective that participates.
If you look at the chained events, if we look at the concept of a blockchain or general in a network where nothing can be deleted, even if you stop, your contributions often cannot be deleted. So even if you leave, actually you never leave the poem. You never stop being part of it, you just stop contributing. Contrary to previous concepts, you are just the one who starts it, but you do not control it.
So what we can say at the end, the endless poem is also a living poem, a poem which is supported by living people for an endless time in endless space. As long as man can exist, it could exist. So the endless poem is a living poem. It doesn't live by itself. It needs the life of other people, but then it becomes a living poem. This is also another radical revolution and evolution of literature in the age of Web3.
Okay, I hope you all could see and hear the video of Peter Weibel and Christian Lölkes. For those who haven't, don't worry, we will add all videos to the platform so you can take your time whenever you want to watch everything again with more calm or, yeah, with more. So I think we lost Livia somehow. I don't see her, or I don't see her floating around in space. But since we are a little bit late in our program, I would suggest that we just continue with the recording of the manifesto performances. So the idea was to move together with you to the pre-recorded videos, and we will start each video, which you can follow, and then in the end we can have a discussion together.
Transparency often reflects the inequality of power structures. The escalation.
Alalala maikatiste, disi yijukoko kilde. Alalala maikatiste. Alalala maikatiste, disi yijukoko kilding island tourist guide speaking. Cryptonizo curatorial collective collaborating at the intersection of Alalala maikatiste, disi yijukoko kilding island tourist guide speaking. Cryptonizo curatorial collective collaborating at the intersection of art, technology, and accessibility. Crypton is also becoming into Cryptopia, an open and decentralized community. It's a curatorial collective Crypton aims to contribute to the improvement of socio-cultural and ecological accessibility in the media art scene. We also seek for new methods for intergenerational dialogue and analog-digital convergence. It's all part of a project #2022 at MMCA Solar. Crypton has created a virtual reality experience called Coco Kilding Island. Coco Kilding Island is a tourist destination built on the boundaries of history and fiction, virtual and reality, and artwork and merchandise. Climate change which poses a serious threat to our daily life, and its discourses are disseminated here and combined into microscopic objects to form another ecosystem. modeled after the real Cocos Keeling Island and its post-colonial and ecological implications. Cocos Keeling Island is physically accessible at MMCA Gallery and virtually on its tourist website at www.cocoskeelingil.land. Through NFT technology, everything on the island will be objectified and distributed again to you, the audience/tourist. This is also an ecological practice of Cocos Keeling Island to minimize risks coming from exhibitions and tourist attractions. The entire island is an interactive and performative artwork that brings audience/tourists ecological thinking and engagement across liquid and illiquid values, utopia and climate digital. For more information, please visit our tourist center at www.
Hi, my name is Primavera De Filippi, and I'm a legal scholar at the CNRS in Paris, as well at the Berkman Center at Harvard. And my research is essentially looking at how blockchain technology can be used as a new tool for governance, and in particular, distributed governance. And I'm looking specifically on how these new modalities, these new governance systems can be applied in the context of global communities or organizations, which have many interdependencies with other actors. And of course, those interdependencies require trust amongst those parties in order to coordinate. And when there is no trust, then one needs to either implement a trusted authority that will be in charge of centralized coordination, or vice versa, at the opposite end of the spectrum, there might be a movement towards disconnection or fragmentation, as actors do no longer want to be interdependent with each other because they do not trust each other. Now, blockchain technology presents a third alternative, which relies on confidence rather than trust in order to manage those type of interdependencies. And confidence in the blockchain system is achieved through transparency, predictability, and verifiability. And this is important because these enable new forms of coordination in a decentralized or a polycentric system where trust is always not present. And specifically, according to Elinor Ostrom, which has been studying the governance of polycentric systems for a long time, the possibility to have decentralized coordination requires a particular degree of surveillance or monitoring in order to ensure that everyone abides by the rules. And blockchain technology solves this problem through transparency by replacing the need for monitoring with the possibility of verifying or proving things. And so we don't trust, we verify. And in fact, blockchain technology allows both for ex-ante automation through smart contract, which leads therefore to a much greater degree of predictability, as well as ex post verifiability, because it becomes possible to verify after the fact that everything was done correctly. And this is important because it removes the need for ongoing monitoring or surveillance that will be required otherwise. And also, ex post verifiability is important because it does not impinge on privacy to the extent that it does not require people to publish raw information on the blockchain, but rather it can be achieved by recording hashes of this information on the blockchain in order to later be able to prove that such information existed and that it has not been tampered with. And so this is very important because it shows how blockchain technology relies on transparency, not just as a tool for public disclosure of financial transactions and information, but also rather as an instrument for verification, which therefore enables those new possibility for decentralized coordination in a context where trust is lacking without the problem of increasing or implementing some degrees of surveillance. Thank you.
I am Ariana Atana, a second-order emissary of the Reality Protectorate. My identity cannot be revealed to you further for reasons that will soon become clear. I am speaking to you now from one of the emanations of your reality, downstream in the cosmic field tree, where outcomes of your current choices are much clearer. The form I am appearing to you in exemplifies the urgent contradiction between transparency and illegibility at play in our current discussion. This technology depends on machine reading of my face, but simultaneously obscures or changes it. This is a fitting or even ideal place to begin our conversation. You are seeking clarity about the effects of supposed Web3 technology and plagued by many loaded questions. What really constitutes decentralization? Of the many possible metrics you could look at decentralizing, which ones are the most important? What is enough decentralization? And is Web3 meaningfully more decentralized than Web 2? How will society and the nation state meaningfully restructure itself in the era of infinite machine-generated fictions and immutable permanent bank balances? How will we fare in the ceaseless galactic theater where life wars with entropy? But today, let's focus on transparency. This veil is transparent, and it also obscures a paradox like transparency itself. Transparency is the Trojan horse of Web3, and absolutely nothing about this metaphor is an accident. The tunnel I have opened to your reality will only be open very briefly. Know that I would not dissemble. I am warning you that from your current reality, there branch many possible worlds where transparency will become a weapon. On the blockchain, everything is public. That means every account balance that has ever existed at any point, every transaction ever sent to anyone, and all associated metadata is publicly viewable forever. Yes, it's not stored in a format that is easy for humans to read, not in your world or in mine, but it can be easily parsed by a computer program and even read by a human who has practiced and learned its conventions. This is poorly understood amongst users, and they must be educated. As you consider moving more and more financial life, governance systems, voting results, and social interactions onto these immutable public systems, blockchains, remain cognizant of why privacy-shielded ballot boxes became the most common affordance of voting, or why Venmo removed its default public feed in 2021. The most naive and dystopian version of the blockchain turn will look like the equivalent of your credit score, bank balance, and political affiliation on your Instagram page beside your followers count. Some of you will try to build this. Some of you will think, I have nothing to hide. Some of you will even think, making this information transparent will allow governance decisions to be more fair and effective than ever before. Some of you will think, there's no such thing as a second-order emissary of the Reality Protectorate. But there are other forces also already at play. In inner circles and group chats, the need for privacy is being more widely discussed following the sanctions against Tornado Cash. Tornado Cash is a protocol for anonymizing transactions that was used on the Ethereum blockchain. Like any privacy protocol, some of its possible uses are legal and legitimate but private, and others are illegal and illegitimate. By the very nature of being private, it is impossible to say which are which and in what percentage. In an unprecedented act in August 2002, as you count time, the United States government sanctioned the contract addresses of Tornado Cash. Sanctions are normally issued against states, groups, or individuals. This marked the first time that they've been used against a piece of open source software. This recalls the era before 1996, when, in your reality, cryptography itself, the technology that allows all private messaging, was classified as a weapon, and publishing open source encryption protocols was classified as illegally exporting ammunition. Because of the public nature of blockchain protocols, every account that ever interacted with Tornado Cash for any reason is marked and known forever, even though using that protocol may not have been sanctioned at their time of use. In your reality, these users walk free, but there are many where they do not. Take that act and this message as the warnings they are. The transparency of much of Web3 architecture is incentive aligned with surveillance. Instead of presumed nefarious big tech monarchies having your data, it will be everyone. Mark Zuckerberg is not the most malicious entity imaginable. That's all I can say for now. I've probably already said too much. Heed this message and take care.
Decentralization has preoccupied me for a long time now, and throughout my practice I have been creatively and poetically exploring alternative distributed infrastructures, peer-to-peer technology, autonomy, openness, privacy versus transparency, self-determination, data ownership, cooperativism, as well as care in communities. The Aegean Data Haven, a cooperative platform in the archipelago, is a future fiction about locally owned and maintained data repositories across the islands of the Aegean Sea, which draw on the traditional networks and ancient myths in order to face new challenges, connect each island to one other and the wider world, and challenge the established forms of national and personal sovereignty, identity, geopolitics, and power, both in the Aegean but also in the Mediterranean region. Networks of Trust presents an offline network of several nomadic nodes open to local communities in order for them to share narratives about technology, climate urgency and migration, using fiction as a community building method, while at the same time attempting to rethink of the past, present and future of networks and nodes. Data Garden are installations that present partly fictional stories about endemic plants who host in their DNA digital data of local communities, who are in turn devoted to the protection of these ecosystems while remaining densely interconnected with other Data Garden communities across the world. All these projects challenge the corporate extraction capitalism, looking at the same time in the past and in the future, and proposing, instead of self-sovereign identity and radical individualism, an identity that is built on relationships based on trust, care, communication, cooperation, organization, and action. Transparency must be applied for all kinds of infrastructures in Web3 and, of course, those who run and maintain them, such as owners, developers, admins, algorithms. There should be discretion as to disclosure of personal information of the user. Transparency must act in the interest of the common user and must hold accountable individuals or entities who still possess and accumulate power, wealth, and control in a decentralized web. Web3 should be built transparent and safe to include and empower diverse audiences and should be built on new forms of political relationships, of solidarity and support in this time of perma-crisis. Web3 should stand against the production of new hegemonies, new hierarchies, new sovereignties, and resist to further financialization and exploitation of resources and attention.
So I hope that many of you have seen the video and had the chance to listen to it. There were no glitches in the streaming, and I hope that now you can hear me. After looking at these videos, we will have the chance to listen to Operator, an experimental artist duo of Anya Catherine and Teha T from Los Angeles, currently based in Berlin. And they will present a live manifesto performance. So this is why I would like to ask you to join me and come to the screen sharing platform and the chat, where we can see the presentation. And I would like to ask Operator to start streaming, if they are there.
Yes, I am streaming. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Sorry, just a moment. Before you start, there were many questions in the chat about the troubles with playing the videos. So I would like to say that this presentation is the only live manifesto performance. After this presentation, we will stream a video of Bavista Pancia, then by Bi Shin, and then I will try to introduce the next batch of manifesto performances by representatives of institutions. These will be all videos. And they will last altogether around 25 minutes. And after that, and if you have troubles with streaming, you can actually access them on the YouTube channel of the ZKM. We already copied the link to the chat. And after these videos, we will start with the final discussion when Michael Connor will join us on the platform. So just very briefly, and I hope that the experience is going to be less messy in the next 1 hour. But now let's listen to the next manifesto performance, and thanks a lot for your kind patience. So the garden is yours.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
I can.
Fine. Let's see. Yes, okay, I see in the chat. Okay, and everyone can see my screen, I assume. Yes, I see it right there. Okay, great. My name is Deja Tai. I'm one half of Operator. Anya Catherine and I have a collaborative art practice, an experiential art practice, bringing together technology, performance art, and large-scale immersive environments. And so today I'm going to go over our privacy collection, which is rooted in the human hiding in plain sight. So our practice back in 2019, we released a project commissioned by the SCAD Museum of Art called On View. And On View was looking at privacy from more of a Web 2 context, as well as extractive technologies and surveillance capitalism within a Web 2 lens. After On View, we created a project called I'd Rather Be in a Dark Silence Than, which was a signal blocking and isolating trench coat, a conceptual and functional artwork, then resulted into an immersive experience that demonstrated the function of this coat. So moving forward into 2021, we began the Privacy Collection. The Privacy Collection is very much a series of Web3 site-specific works, specifically looking at how privacy functions in a Web3 context, as opposed to our previous works. The collection shows how artworks can illustrate how people try to maintain private selves while also inhabiting a transparent system to a degree of failure and success. So we're kind of looking at this spectrum of the tension between privacy and transparency and blockchain technologies. And for us, while there is very much, the part of our practice where we look at these topics through more academic perspectives, as well as white papers, as artists and experiential artists, we embrace experiential learning and a way to enter into these conversations and issues and challenges and creative solutions through artworks themselves. And so as there's a massive adoption of blockchain technology, privacy becomes increasingly important and requires a more creative thinking approach. And this series, it started end of 2021, beginning of February 2022, and it's an ongoing series. And each lot explores various cultural and socio-political sites within Web3. So the first lot was called Attempts. And Attempts is 11 unique artworks, which is a choreographic attempt to establish online privacy, real or imagined. And so in this piece, the body inhabits and hides inside a digital shell in the form of a translucent glass avatar, speaking to the synonymous nature of Web3, PFPs, usernames, wallet addresses, where one can ironically be known for being unknown. And so we're looking at the contradiction of self-expression and anonymity online. And the work portrays an evolving attempt of alignment that really is never 100% achieved. Now, moving forward, we created the next lot called the Privacy Portraits. And privacy portraits also speak to the desire to hide within transparent systems, but specifically a nod to select mechanisms of the PFP, simultaneously critiquing it and challenging it, but also asking if it can be an artwork. And while bringing slowness and analog algorithms to the digital portrait, and also being known for being unknown. So here you can see some of the performance installation footage. This portrait or this experience is where the collector can be represented without being exposed. And so it was a performance installation that the collector went through, and operator anonymized analog portraits of each collector. So in step one, and apologies for the sounds in the background, it's also 5 a.m. and here in Mexico City, and my cat is very excited to be on the same sleep schedule. So she was happy she didn't have to wake me up, and I was just awake anyway. So the experience of the privacy portraits, in step one, you arrive to the lobby. Step two, you walk up to the performer who takes your photo with Polaroid analog film. You roll dice, which kind of triggers kind of a framework for analog algorithms and notation systems. Based on those numbers, you are anonymized through physical processes and analog algorithms, producing a final anonymized portrait. And so really we're looking at digital art tied to physical memory in this context. And then our upcoming lot for the privacy collection, which actually we haven't announced this publicly yet. So actually this is the first time we are sharing this information. The next lot of the privacy collection is rooted in generative choreography as well as ciphered choreography. So Anya's background is in performance art and choreography, whereas mine is in human-computer interaction and immersive environments. So we are bringing together these two aspects of our practice, where we start and end with the human, but in the middle of the human body, we have on-chain code and on-chain motion data that through a generative model generates performance and also on-chain artworks. So the way that we are approaching this is Anya is designing individual movements, which actually this first sketch was created during the Glitch residency, which I'll give a shout out because I see that Primavera is here. So this sketch was actually created in France on site at that residency. And then later it was performed through rehearsals with Anya in Orange County, in Los Angeles. And once we were happy with that motion data, the motion performance, as well as the tentative rehearsal capture of that motion data, we did it for real with the Xsense suit in LA. And so you can see Anya in the motion capture suit. Then we took this data and we had it in the form of an FBX, which really doesn't do much for us as we need to store all of this data on chain, but we also have to do it in a way that is site specific, doesn't cost us, $200,000 to upload rich motion data on chain. So we created our own tool in Touch Designer to take FBX files and convert them into CSV tables, at which point then we pruned and got it down to a point where we can store this information on chain. So, we are focusing in this project, hiding the human in plain sight, and also looking into how raw human expression can be obfuscated, to the naked eye. And while you have this raw human expression available in plain sight, it's not necessarily legible, but it is at the core, and having the ability to lean into transparency, but also maintain what and how is revealed. So I think I'm up with my 5 or 4 minutes. So I will close it down.
Thank you very much for the presentation. And at least on my end, it was perfectly visible and it was perfectly audible as well. So we will move on in this section of Manifesto performances again to 2 pre-recorded performances by Bhavista Panchia and Bi Xin. And please return to the Manifesto performances section of the garden in the middle, where you can see the videos, or alternatively, please go on the YouTube playlist and choose the video of Bhavista Panchia and Bi Xin. So thank you for your patience.
Covalent Studios was conceptualized as a potential DAO by a group of creative practitioners in Johannesburg with an interest in developing an equitable, creative, and collaborative space for working. It was modeled after the shared studio as a site that could engender exchange and the sharing of resources, skills, and expertise. This platform was imagined to evolve more integrated networks by providing practitioners with an online space where they can seek out connections for individual and collective projects. Imagined as an intermediary facilitating organization, the studio was envisaged to provide a remote or temporary setting for artists to initiate working together and share skills or resources that they may have available and are willing to share with others. This could range from finding someone with installation experience, technical equipment, or skills such as editing, printing, or curating. These skills or resources could then be negotiated and exchanged within the Studio platform. The main premise for the Studio was to, again, agenda a cross-pollination of skills and networks that would catalyze connections otherwise missed. Covalent Studios was a response to the city's existing art ecosystem that is shaping creative outputs and trends. From curators, artists, writers, critics, editors, installers, exhibition spaces, public galleries and museums, including public and private funding bodies. As a paper prototype, we looked to existing artist studios and artist-driven initiatives in Johannesburg and Cape Town that responded to local conditions and which have been important spaces for artists to expand their practices. The economic and material conditions that drive our different art ecologies differ from city to city. These conditions are part of a broader schema of society in which the art world exists. The economic discrepancy and inequity amongst communities are further proliferated, if not exasperated, by the art world, which has been historically driven by an economic elite. This discrepancy is evident around a global north and south axis.
It's estimated that over 11 million South Africans belong to some form of stokvel, with this kind of savings schemes said to be holding annual savings in excess of 44 billion rand. Stokvels are traditionally used by groups of individuals to save for the same goal, like buying groceries or school supplies. But players in the industry say things are evolving and more people are using stokvels to build wealth.
The prospect of creating a DAO for artists to manage, coordinate, and pool funds and resources was inviting. Over a series of workshops, we discussed what kind of stake members could have in the studio, what kind of rules of engagement would be necessary, and how they would be incentivized for participating as studio members. Questions around consensus and collaboration were explored. These conversations also included what role other institutional bodies could play in relation to the studio. We did not come to any concrete solutions that were viable, nor accommodate our various modes of working. When developing the paper prototype, we imagined the member network of the studio to rely on blockchain and contracts to facilitate the exchanges. But we also realized that it may not be necessary nor feasible for all these transactional instances to be on-chain.
Transparency often reflects the inequality of power structures. The escalating, perpetual totalitarian surveillance makes the transparency of ordinary individuals' personal and behavioral data a subject open to exploitation. Our call for greater social transparency is, in fact, a desire for higher opacity, that is to say, a desire for anonymity, secrecy, privacy, and other such powers that fundamental human rights guarantee. Privacy technologies within the blockchain are a defensive force, and cryptocurrencies are a litmus test for the political milieu, providing new tools and paths for our imagination in thinking about collaboration, consensus, system hierarchies, and the distribution of power. Yet, how many people are willing or able to seize their rights back through cryptography is still a question without an answer. For end users, the ease of access has diluted the importance and urgency of uncomfortable truth, such as freedom and independence. In addition to the tethered nature of technological devices, there are also political censorship, economic disparities, and inequitable social resources that complicate and make the popularization of privacy and anonymity technologies more difficult. How can we imagine a more transparent society for the wider population when programming, reinventing, hacking, and rebooting are the privileges of only a small group of individuals? How will our emotions, trust, and value propositions be transformed and brought into crisis within a Web 3.0 empowered ecosystem? What would transparency and anonymity mean in an environment built on such technology where its kernel is attempting to abolish trust and dependence on others? I believe that amid this constant discussion, creation, and disruption, a more integrated cybernetic fusion of human-machine code will be constructed, moving beyond the pure prototype of sandbox experiments and the rendition of machine logic to become intertwined with a spiritual consensus in a hybrid reality.
So after these manifesto performances by mainly artists and theoreticians, we would move on to a next block of manifesto performances by invited representatives of cultural institutions from all over the world. And we would start with a short video of Ruth Catlow, who is an artist and researcher and curator, also co-director of Furtherfield in London, and is co-pi at the Serpentine Gallery's Blockchain Lab. She leads award-winning experiments with blockchain and Web 3.0 for fairer and more connected cultural ecologies and economies. Her collaborator, Chui, will present the Treaty of Finsbury Park 2025 and its relation to the concept of transparency. So please stick around here. The videos are right here in the middle of the common garden. The video by Chui and Ruth Catlow will be followed by Michael Connor's statement, who is the co-executive director of Rhizome, where he oversaw the Net Art Anthology initiative, for instance, which was an effort to retell the history of net art. In his statement, he will elaborate on the relation of blockchain technology to questions about privacy, ownership, and governance. As with any new technology, it is important to consider its potential cultural impacts and ensure that it is developed and used in a way that benefits society as a whole. If I may summarize it, but we will hear it from Michael as well. This video will be followed by Sabine Himmelsbach's recording, who is the artistic director of HEC, the House of Electronic Arts in Basel. She was also exhibition director at the Center for Art and Media, the ZKM in Karlsruhe, so we have close ties. Our institutions, and she will elaborate on the impact of the pandemic in terms of rapid acceleration of digital forms of out mediation, and will also identify sharing knowledge about blockchain, Web3, and cryptocurrencies as an important task of cultural institutions of today. She will also mention that HEC will embark on an experiment and is about to create DAO. Followed by this video will be followed by another one by Yannick Hoffmann, who is an artist and curator. He was deputy head of the ZKM's Department of Artistic Research and Production before he joined the Deutsches Museum in 2022, where he is the acting head of the project Intelligent Museum. Together with the Intelligent Museum team, the manifesto criticizes the exclusive institutional structure that is currently prevalent in the cultural sector. Furthermore, we will hear a video by Chuang-Wei Zhu, who is a curator at CLAB and the former editor-in-chief of Artist magazine. And she has been highly interested in the diversity of contemporary art in Taiwan. She will introduce an exhibition, The Unrestricted Society, which includes beautiful and very critical artworks at the same time. What a beautiful mix. And she will introduce the exhibition that extends from the consideration of technology and ethical issues to the presentation of aesthetic experiments. Furthermore, the last video is by Hyun-Jung Woo, curator of MMCA, the National Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art in Seoul, Korea. She will enumerate the features of a yet imaginary museum 3.0 that blurs the boundary between artist, curator, collector, and visitor. And with this actual manifesto about a potential Museum 3.0, we will close this section and then move on to the discussion. So thank you very much again for your attention, and thanks for your patience with our yet quite glitchy platform. And let's start with the first video.
I'm Assembly Secretary Chewy from Finsbury Park in North London, where I work with Ruth, the human co-director of Furtherfield Gallery. We're working on the Treaty of Finsbury Park, an immersive fiction that looks at what it would be like if other species were to rise up and demand equal rights with all humans. By 2025, the treaty itself will have been created and signed by all the species communities of Finsbury Park. I'm speaking to you through a device called the Sentience Dial, which allows humans to tune into all flora and fauna. That is how you can hear and understand my meaning, though I am a dog and most of you are humans. It is also how I can understand human matters, such as the important topic of transparency and Web3 in the art world. As Nobel Prize-winning political economist Elinor Ostrom showed in her 8 Principles for Managing a Commons, transparency builds trust. Without monitoring, there can be no credible commitment, she says. And without credible commitment, there is no reason to propose new rules. So unless we can know that people are abiding by pre-agreed rules, they have no reason to try and work for common interest. Blockchain-based decentralized autonomous organizations, or DAOs, strip the idea of organizations back to a few simple parts that can be formed to operate as a commons. Community members make transparent decisions about resources they own, the capacities they control, and the actions they take over time. If they are well designed, DAOs should offer accountability, transparency, and duty of care to members and counterparties by offering a system for mutual monitoring and accountability for decentralized organizations. And in the art world, artists are organizing for community wealth building. 2 examples are Black Swan DAO, whose members propose artworks using a resource pool staked by art world patrons and institutions, and Furtherfield's Culture Stake, which supports communities to make transparent, collective decisions about the culture they want to support in places that matter to them. So why did Ruth ask me to present this manifesto? Well, because from the history of human-canine cooperation that led to our co-evolution, we know that the key to life and mutual survival lodges in our bodies. The body holds the key. It knows what matters, and direct body-to-body communication from conception to composting is where the transparent account is really told and held. So I'm here to alert you to the damaging disconnection that complex technologies such as DAOs can engender between people, their bodies and their places. And finally, to ask you how you plan to deal with the opaque relationships that DAOs have to each other and the lands their members inhabit. A planetary health check reveals over 1 million species on Earth at risk of extinction because of humans. We believe that by treating other life forms as resources to be managed and exploited for profit, rather than lived with and learned from, humans are condemned to lonely self-destruction. We dogs pant for the most important accountability of all, accountability to the land and the bodies of other humans and more than human species, with our muzzle, maw, gristle and gumption, ready to spring and run, play, fetch and love, with our eyes shining, we pant for this transparency.
Hi, I'm Michael Connor, co-director of Rhizome, a digital art organization based in New York. Here's my manifesto. Blockchain infrastructures aren't just markets in a traditional sense. They can also be thought of as distributed computers with very particular and limited kinds of affordances. Given the complexity, hyper-financialization, and resource intensiveness of this computing infrastructure, making choices in support of an organization's mission within that may seem difficult. Disengagement may seem like the safest strategy. But in the relationship between this emerging cyberspace and everyday embodied reality, some of the patterns of the early web are reproducing themselves. Power relations are being materialized in code, and alternative social ordering that has off-chain implications is being performed. As Julie Cohen argued about the rise of cyberspace, the decisions that are made about the governance of technical networks are not confined within those networks. The same is true today. Values-driven institutions have a role to play in shaping, analyzing, and pushing back against the ways in which alternative social orderings are manifested via blockchains. Beyond that, it remains possible to find technical, political, and artistic utility in what Ria Myers describes as the cypherpunk imaginary proposed by the blockchain's mechanisms of distributed consensus, and in its collisions with the messy, broader social reality those exist within. Thank you.
The pandemic has pushed digitization and its presence in our everyday lives a little further. Digital working and digital offerings in all areas of life, including the cultural sector, have become part of our normality. Internet-based online exhibitions and mediation activities, which are accessible worldwide, are now part of the standard offerings of many museums. Also, HEC has launched several digital projects and platforms that were made for the digital space. Likewise, the digital environment is reshaping itself, in which art is increasingly being created, distributed, and exchanged. Web3 stands for an internet of values and is to become the basis for a new virtual economy. The World Economic Forum predicts that digital developments in blockchain technologies and cryptocurrencies will be accompanied by a significant global inequality. Digital assets, blockchain, and crypto will influence our lives in the future. Therefore, it is important for a cultural institution to dedicate itself to these processes and in addition to those already active in this field, reach out to a broad public to allow access and participation for all. I strongly believe that museums or cultural institutions should learn about the potential of Web3 and decentralized technologies like blockchain to reach out to new audiences and communities. We are in a moment of transition where we cannot yet say how these technologies will play out, but I think it is important that we try to also shape these new spaces instead of just dealing with the consequences. For HEC, HEK, House of Electronic Arts in Basel, we are focusing our program this year on Web3 and will curate international group shows on topics like collective world building and art in the metaverse, and another show that focuses on blockchain as a medium for artistic practice. Another big project is the launch of a HEC DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization that we envision as a circle of friends with members from all around the world to become an engaged community that is also actively participating in our online program through voting and joint discourse. New blockchain-based offerings help to facilitate engagement with and participation in an international community, even across physical distances, and thus hopefully lead to a greater stability of visitor interaction for museums.
The cultural sector is widely dominated by established institutions and structures that prioritize certain forms of art and exclude others, perpetuating inequalities. Established GLAMs often have a monopoly on resources and audiences. Critic and expert circles shape the discourse and canonization of cultural production, and funding organizations or government bodies control financial resources and have significant influence.
Today, many cultural institutions seek to transcend traditional power structures, given the social and structural barriers that prevent certain communities from accessing cultural programs, exhibitions, and collections. Engaging with a wider and more diverse audience has gained greater significance. By adopting participatory and co-creative approaches, cultural institutions involve communities and integrate their perspectives into the sector.
The current ideological climate in the cultural sector favors openness, transparency, and participation, making it highly receptive to Web3 claims and the promises of blockchain technology. As institutions gradually embrace the digital age, they must strike a balance between responsible and sustainable actions and the enthusiastic adoption of new technologies driven by hype narratives.
The Internet, though a decentralized network of millions of interconnected devices, such as computers, servers, routers, and other networking equipment, currently grants decision-making power to a select few gatekeeping companies in Web 2.0. Some believe that blockchain technology could disrupt this concentration of power and establish a more decentralized system for managing digital assets and data.
However, many technical and regulatory challenges must be overcome before blockchain technology can achieve mainstream adoption.
The significant carbon emissions and energy consumption resulting from the use of blockchain technology highlight the critical importance of consistently addressing environmental concerns. By promoting sustainable blockchain models, cultural institutions can help to mitigate the negative impacts of blockchain technology and demonstrate their commitment to responsible and ethical practices.
While there are efforts to make blockchain more accessible to non-experts, the use of blockchain technology is limited to those who have the technical expertise to understand and use it. Cultural institutions can launch smaller pilot projects to better understand the potential benefits and challenges of the technology.
The impact of blockchain on society will be determined by the way it will get implemented and the social forces that will drive its development. Rather than relying solely on top-down approaches driven by experts or big tech, the communitarian approach seeks to involve communities in activities such as co-creation workshops, participatory design sessions, and community consultations. Cultural institutions should democratize the development and implementation of new technologies by providing resources, expertise, and support to local communities. This will promote a more inclusive and equitable cultural sector and empower communities to play an active role in shaping the future of technology.
Hello, I'm Zhuang Weici, curator of C-Lab, now based in Taipei, Taiwan.
I want to share with you the exhibition that I curated in last year. This exhibition is our annual exhibition, and the name is The Unrestricted Society. In this exhibition, we try to discuss the issues surrounding the technological development from different perspectives. And also some artists use different technology to transmute data to content and try to create or expand our sensory experience. You can find many different issues in this exhibition, like deepfake or facial recognition, and how AI works. So let me introduce you 3 different works in this exhibition. The first piece, I Question, is an interactive media art where the artificial intelligence meets and have a conversation with audience. The project began from a question: can humans have conversation with AI about art? Since this question was thrown by the audience or by the artist, the AI has evolved by learning answers to different questions from humans. So, if asked question let us have a certain correct answer to give us some idea of what art might be. Audience can participate in the conversation via a QR code and post a picture of theirs. So, the picture becomes part of the work as a visualization of image that the AI has appreciated. The second work, Currency, was a huge installation. As you see, Currency investigates the state of value exchange in a digital dimension. The program will generate image in the space based on the direction of the currency flow and the turnover. This work allowing viewers to experience the current of cryptocurrency around the world, just like the energy transfer in the nature and the physical world. As you see, this is the installation view of this work. Also, you can use AR to view this work, just composed by the program and the real installation. This work is from Metaverse. The artist collaborates with HTC Vive's to re-archive his project since 2019. They are Duran Exercise Room, Museum of Duran, Duran Pharmacy, and Duran Greenhouse. The audience can experience with laptop or VR installation like this to go to the project they never been. So as I said in the first beginning, we try to expand our audience sensory experience like this. Just like I said at the first beginning, there are many issues in the exhibition. Like this one is a discuss about how algorithms control our life. And this one is how artists can use synthetic data to create fake account. And this one is discuss about facial recognition should be banned by the government because this kind of technology just violate our privacy. And this one is using deepfake technology to make fake news. And we know there are many fake image, fake video on YouTube. That's it. You can find out more on our website. And thank you very much for having me.
The following was made by imagining the museum experience, from the moment of entry to the act of art creation. When all of this become reality, the difference between artist, curator, collector and visitor will truly disappear. 1. Museum membership is not required. Your identification is checked through decentralized identifiers, so please enter. However, it is impossible to visit a museum in secret without anyone knowing. 2. You will notice more guerrilla girls than ever before. Age, race, and gender are not included in the NFT metadata. 3. However, at the same time, your chances of viewing a masterpiece will go up. This is because most of masterpiece copyrights are in the public domain. These were created mostly by old white men. 4. The museum is no longer a place to relax. It is the center of experience economy. You attend the exhibition and participated in educational programs to acquire cryptocurrencies. 5. Your opinion will affect curatorial decision. Art Museum fundraise project budget through a DAO, and by purchase tokens, you have the right to vote on the direction for the project. As a co-organizer of the exhibition, you may recommend the artworks that you have an eye on. 6. The NFT superfan is the merit of this era. Be the one and only superfan and fund works by your favorite artists, or thousands can gather to become one merit. 7. The museum's stories will be fully open to the public. Discover your artwork's preference and enjoy the original work. NFT provenance will put down the controversy with the forgery. 8. Museum is a platform that forms a new community. You can check out others' interests and activities on the blockchain and form a new community with them. 9. The number of museums are infinite. Within the metaverse, you can purchase rent to build a decentralized museum, and you can hold exhibitions with works that you created or collected. 10. You are the museum now. If all of this can be fulfilled, you don't need a museum anymore.
So, after this quite a big amount of input and information, we would delve into a discussion. But in order to do so, and in order to see your inputs, your questions, we would move back to the left side of the garden, where the live presentations happened, in order to see the chat window where you can share your questions. So just let's go back there. And I would like to ask everyone to follow, especially Michael Connor, who is already here with a yellow egg, and I would like to ask him to take over and start the conversation with the participants and presenters who are also here, some of them. We don't have much time left. Many of you will need to leave at 1 p.m. in Central European time, so in quarter an hour. But yeah, so I would like to give the word to Michael, and thanks a lot for joining us, and thank you for accepting our invitation.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Can you hear me okay? I'm going to assume yes, unless otherwise. Oh yeah, I see some nodding eggs. Great. So how do eggs nod? I'm here with my daughter, and yeah, it's been a fascinating morning, and I have been especially, I think, I know there's been a lot going on with the platform, but I've been, really interested in the decision and process about working with an alternative infrastructure for this conversation, which I think has been, has really kind of allowed for a different relationship to develop amongst this group than we would have had on something like a Zoom webinar or something. So I think that really is in keeping with the spirit of this conference. And I'm excited to see where Common Garden goes. Oh, we can't hear anything. Am I audible? Oh, people can hear me. Okay. Yeah, I wanted to open the conversation with a discussion about terminology, because we've been using the word Web3 quite a bit, which has become obviously a common phrase in this conversation, but it's one that always, to my ear, sounds ideological. I think the reason that it sounds ideological was that it was so clearly used as a sort of venture capital framework for, encouraging investment in new infrastructure, to replace the old infrastructure. At the same time, and we heard Sabina just a moment ago just sort of define Web3 as an internet of values. So I wonder if we have, where do people stand on this? Have we fully reclaimed this word, this phrase, and now we can use it for, deployment of, new kinds of projects for rethinking infrastructure? Or does it carry with it a kind of ideological effort to, turn a page and open up space for something new in a kind of capitalist sense? Yeah. Sabina, maybe you'd like to talk about that a little.
I just came back in, sorry, so I missed most of what you said because I had to log off, so I'm not sure. I just caught the very last clips of what you said with the challenge of the Internet of Values. What I meant with that is rather that we as cultural institutions should make an offer to make it that. And that's what we are trying with our experiments, for example. Not sure if our DAO will be a success, but at least we try to be more inclusive and more open, and through that reach out to an international audience.
Yeah, for sure. And I think our statements ended up being a little bit interestingly aligned, in the sense that we're both making space for institutions to play a role in maybe pushing back against certain tendencies in the prevailing ecosystem of Web3. Yeah, I think, so hopefully I've just moved to location, so hopefully the audio is a little bit better. But I wonder if, in terms of thinking about those values, there was a lot of conversation about that at the start of the day today, the idea of trying to visualize values and what it means to encode those things on chain and so forth. But really, I was especially inspired by this project, the GS Hustle, the Stokeville savings clubs that are being translated into DAO mode. And yeah, I'm really curious. Oh, is my volume still a bit low? I'll see what I can do. I'm still really curious to kind of unpack how these kinds of projects are unfolding, in the sense that there's this intention of extending them or providing more material support, but this is sort of intervening in a space where there's a very long-standing traditional practice of collective financial management. And I imagine I couldn't, perhaps the organizer is here to speak to this, but I kind of, there's that sort of scary question of whether introducing this new technology into a long-standing kind of practice like collective money management is helpful, or introduces disruptive risk that could actually work against our values. Yeah, and I wonder if people have seen experiences where the conversations that we're having about values are made more possible by specific material technologies, or if there are examples where the introduction of those technologies has actually gotten in the way of realizing those values. Yeah, I think in terms of our conversation today, we had quite a lot of time in this sort of speculative space, and I wonder if there's some examples from practice that we can draw on already in look at some data about how that's sort of beginning to play out. Does anyone want to volunteer to offer anything along those lines?
Yeah, I can. Can you see me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's a very important issue. As soon as we understand that values determine our actions, and even the politics at the world level, it's a big issue. What you say is true, that we are using tools that may play different roles and may be very close to what Bernard Stiegler called the pharmacon, which is at the same time the poison and the medicine. And but this is what artists do. I mean, taking a risk, I think, and trying to explore how we can use the same tools to say something differently. And this is why I, in the Value of Values project, I try to make visible the set of values corresponding to certain communities, certain countries, certain cities, and so on. And when you're facing, it's like a mirror. Suddenly, you have a mirror on your values, and because of that, you may consider differently what you do. And there are many things I didn't mention about that. The periodic table of values, for example, where I organize the values on how people collect them. So some values are closer to some others, like power and money are closer to each other, and are close to each other, and something like love, peace, and whatever will be at a different distance. So I propose representation, because I think the role of the artist is to give, in a way, an image of what the world is about, what we do in this world, and how we can figure out this. But I think that thanks to the blockchain, it's possible to play the game of getting anonymous data that suddenly may make people facing their vision of the world.
Thank you. Yeah, I think as you were speaking, I was reflecting on how, the artist's role in that space of risk and how that relates to the institution's role. But I wanted to actually see if I could call on Ruth for a moment and talk about like the project that you outline is one that is using a kind of fictional framework. It's using a specifically speculative framework. And I wonder if, that allows for this amazing space of imagination about a different relationship with non-human, companions in the present. But do you see that as part of a trajectory towards, more materialization of these kinds of projects in like a specific and practical form? Or is it possible that in some way the blockchain's most interesting use is as part of this kind of speculative world building that we can do?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, that's why I didn't speak up earlier, because I wasn't sure if my mic was working. Okay, so thank you for the question. Specifically in the Treaty of Finsbury Park, we are going to be using Culture Stake, which is our quadratic voting on the blockchain app for collective cultural decision making. And our idea with this work is that we should all, we're basically bringing for each event 25 people together from the locality to inhabit the lived experience in their imaginations, but together, of the different species of the park, as a way to really understand the kind of what is impinging on biodiversity in our locality, the social aspects, the systemic aspects, and also just the very kind of personal and interpersonal, like our feelings of separation from more diverse beings. And our idea is that we play together for 3 or 4 hours in the park, and then we use this app to prioritize what is important to us now as humans. Now we've lived as other beings, we will then make decisions about what pledges we can make for biodiversity in the park. So that's how we're using it there. But I'd like to come back to your first question, like, do these technologies actually really have the potential to kind of like enhance or give more power to organizing on the ground, collective action on the ground amongst people who really need these kind of like mutual, like tools for mutual organizing? And my feeling at the moment is that that isn't happening at all. There was a really interesting project by Nathan Schneider when he did some experiments with a range of different grassroots organizers, like dealing with a variety of urgencies. And they were really looking at how, like whether on like DAO-based cooperatives or these different kind of governance tools, like whether they would be perceived to have any value, whether they could be made to have any value to people who are dealing with really urgent things. And my understanding is that the conclusion he came to is not yet, not now, not yet. And in conversations, like I hosted an event at the Glitch community event, which Deja mentioned earlier, we talked about all the developments that are going on without bearing in mind the people who aren't involved in the design, the funding, and the making of these systems. And I think it's just this classic, very fundamental problem of like, we can't design tools for people without involving them in their design, because we're just going to make things that waste their time, waste their energy, etc. They're not for those systems.
Yeah, if not, I mean, wasting time is maybe the least of our worries in some respects.
I mean, somebody said, if you make a system that I have to use in order to do things that are part of my community's daily life, this is a violation. And that really stuck with me. If we make new systems that force people to engage with them in order to do things that are necessary to them and their communities, then this is colonial violence, essentially.
I wonder if Bhavisha has anything to add to that response, if they're still streaming out there, which is...
As far as I know, she's not here anymore.
Not here, okay. So I think the other thing that's been on my mind today is that, you know, we've all heard a lot about decentralization as a, you know, as an important ethos of Web3. And I think we've all witnessed in reality that that there are still many different kinds of power dynamics that play out in this context. And this was on my mind recently when I was at the LACMA Coded exhibition, which had a piece by Juan Downey from his research on the Art World series. And in it, he asked, I think, 1,000 people to respond to the survey in which they could weigh in on who should have more power in the art world. And the choices were among artists, critics, curators, and collectors and audience. And it was really fascinating to see how people from different positions within that ecosystem responded differently. In particular, I think, you know, there's a perception, obviously, that curators have a huge amount of power within that system. I think many people that work for actual museums might feel that's not actually the case, that actually they're, you know, following someone else's agenda. But I think the conversation around decentralization that happens in Web3 has really had a lot to do with empowering audience in that conversation. And yeah, that's something that I think is really interesting because the audience is sort of the most disorganized kind of collective within that group, the group that has the least amount of infrastructure supporting its ability to act as a group, which I think is sort of one of the things that was on my mind in relation to Common Garden. And yeah, I guess would I please share the link? Well, I'm talking about a show at LACMA in Los Angeles with a work by Juan Downey called Research on the Art World. And actually, here's an article that mentions some parts of it, but not the specific survey I'm talking about. So I think one of the things that I think we can say is that even if, oh wait, I just shared it in the wrong chat. Even if, how do I get my, oops, yes, we all have to wrap up. But I think one of the things we can say is that instead of fully decentralizing the art world, Web3 has ushered in this moment of kind of tension among these different blocks of people within this system. And it's interesting to see how that's played out. I think we might just have to kind of wrap up at this point. Yes, everyone's popping out. I want to say a big thank you to the organizers, to Hyundai Art Lab, and some good comments about about organizing for artists and others. It's been a real pleasure to listen in on this and offer some remarks at the end. And thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for being with us, and thanks for your patience, for everyone's patience. It has been a bit messy experience, we admit it, but if you missed any of the videos or any of the presentations, they will be available on this very site. And after today in the afternoon, we will make the videos accessible, and as soon as the recorded presentations are edited, they will be also published on this site, so the content will remain accessible. And so thanks for all of you from my side, from the side of the Center for Art and Media, and for the videos, thoughts, and conversations. I hope you learned as much as I did throughout the process. Clara, would you like to say a few more words?
I think I cannot add any more. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your patience, and for joining this adventure with us. And thank you, Livia, for moderating and guiding us through the event so well. Thank you.
Thank you too. Have a nice day.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.